We're going to be in 1 Kings this morning, if you want to be turning there. First Kings 19. I'm going to begin reading in verse 9. 1 Kings 19, verse 9. God's word says, "And he came hither unto a cave, and lodged there. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him. And he said unto him, What doest thou here, Elijah? And he said, I have been very jealous for the Lord of hosts. For the children of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, thrown down thine altars, and slain thy prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away. And he said, Go forth and stand upon the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind rent the mountains, and brake it in pieces, the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire a still small voice. And it was so, when Elijah heard it, that he wrapped his face in his mantle, and went out and stood in the entering into the cave. And beheld, there came a voice unto him, and said, What doest thou here, Elijah? And he said, I have been very jealous for the Lord God of hosts, because the children of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, thrown down thine altars, and slain thy prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away." As we begin to think about and look at this a little bit this morning, we sort of need to know where we're at, what's going on, I guess. We need to keep in mind that this is only a short part of Elijah's story here. Some of the things, the events that have happened in the previous chapters there, Israel, as a nation, had sunk to a new low. They had sunk to into a deep sense of adultery. They were serving all sorts of God. And Yahweh, God, had put them in a 3-year drought. So we find the nation had slipped away from God, was serving other false gods, and because of this, they had not had any rain for 3 years. And near the end of this time, Elijah summons King Ahab. And along with all the citizens there of Israel, to come to Mount Carmel for a challenge. And when they got on Mount Carmel, he challenged them to call down fire. Baal's 450 prophets, he challenged them to call down fire to suck up a sacrifice that they'd put on an altar for him. So they cut up their sacrifice, they put it on the altar, they danced around it, they chanted, they cut themselves, they done everything that they could, but it never happened. And Elijah began to, taunt him a little bit. He'd say, do it a little louder. Maybe he's asleep, or maybe he went on a trip, or something like this. They began to taunt him just a little bit. And then it became Elijah's turn, and he cut up his sacrifice and put it on the altar, built the altar and put it on the altar, and then told them to get water. And they soaked it in water and had a trench around it, and the trench was full of water. And then he went over and he got down on his knees and he knelt there and he said, God, just show them exactly who you are. And about that time, the fire of the Lord fell and sucked up everything. There's nothing left. The sacrifice, the water, the stones, it was all gone. God sucked it all up. After this happened, all the people began to chant, Yahweh is God. They began to chant that Elijah's God was theirs. They killed the 450 prophets of Baal. And the next thing we see is Queen Jezebel swears that she's going to kill Elijah. So we see Elijah running for his life. That's probably what a lot of us would do. We would run for our life if we knew somebody was out to kill us. We first find him sitting under a juniper tree. I like to say, poor, poor, pitiful me sitting here under this juniper tree. He was feeling sorry for himself. The Lord come and ministered to him. The commentators seem to think that it was probably the Son, Jesus himself, that came and ministered to Elijah and strengthened him and told him to go on, and he told him to come to this cave. And we find him here in this cave, but he's still in that same state. He's still in that same mindset as he was there under that juniper tree. You know, I'm poor and pitiful, and I'm the only one left, and they're fixing to get me, and all is not. Have you ever found yourself in that position after you've had a great experience with God? After you've been on the high, on the mountaintop, after you've enjoyed the presence of God in your life for a period of time, and then all of a sudden it seems like Satan has just got you down on the ground, wallering you and rubbing your nose in the mud and all that stuff. The next thing you know, you're sitting around with your arms crossed, your lips pooched out, and you're saying, "Oh, so pitiful in my life. I'm having such a hard time." We find ourselves that way sometimes, don't we? At least I do. I can't speak for you. I do. I find myself that way sometimes. I remember when I had my knees replaced. I found myself in that place. I pooched my lip out and I thought, "Oh, pitiful me. I feel so sorry for myself." I was placed in a nursing home for a couple of weeks. Well, for a week actually. But I was placed in there because Kay couldn't handle me. I'm a little bigger than she is. She couldn't handle me. They was afraid I'd fall on her. So they put me in there, and I found myself rolling myself through the hall in a wheelchair and looking around at my surroundings, and I felt like I was just in a desperate place. I felt sorry for myself. And then after a short period of time, I began to think, why should I feel sorry for myself? My knees are going to heal. I'm going to get stronger, and I'm going to be able to go do what I want to do. And I begin not to feel sorry for myself, but to begin to feel, I don't want to say pity, but begin to feel for those around me. Because their plight was different than mine. A lot of those would never leave. Sometimes we feel that way in our lives. We feel like all is lost. We feel like everything's gone because we're dependent on self. We're looking at our own self to solve our problems. We're looking at our own self to accomplish whatever it needs to be to happen in our lives. And that's where I was at when I found myself there. I was looking at self. What can I do to get me out of here? Well, I couldn't heal myself. God does that. I could work the things that they wanted me to do to try to strengthen and things of that nature. I could do that, and that's what I've done. But, still yet, you kind of feel sorry for yourself. And as I've done that, God began to speak to me. Now, He didn't come to me in a great big voice. He didn't come to me and He said, "Now listen, you've got it made. Why are you feeling sorry for yourself?" He could have come to me and give me a hard time, I guess, but He didn't. He came to me just like He did Elijah here. We find Elijah here in this cave, and again, the angel comes, and they think again it's Jesus. Came and he asked him this question. Why are you here? What's going on? And then he tells him to go out and meet God. Go out and meet God. And why does God come in that gentle whisper? Why does God come in that still small voice? Elijah heard it, and when he heard it there, he pulled his cloak over his face and he went out to meet him. But the thing we need to realize is God doesn't speak as we do. When Kay was trying to encourage me during that period of time, she spoke different than God did. You can do it. You're able to accomplish these things. There was encouragement there. But still yet it was different. With Elijah here, as God spoke to him, it was different. He didn't speak to him as we do. A lot of times we speak out of different things. Maybe we try to speak encouragement or whatever, but sometimes we speak in frustration, don't we? Somebody's down and out and we're trying to encourage them, but yet we're frustrated because we can see the other side and they can't. We speak with frustration sometimes. Sometimes we speak with anger. They won't do exactly what we want them to do. We speak with anger. You need to do these things. Or even insecurity sometimes, we speak with that. But God doesn't speak that way. He speaks in a different manner than we do. So what's important about that still small voice? Well, at that point in time, it was exactly what Elijah needed. You know, sometimes we do need that little boot to get us going, that little kick in life to get us up and moving around. But a lot of times that's not what we need. We need that still small voice. And that's what Elijah needed here. He didn't need somebody to come and say, all right, you've got it made. Keep it going. Look at all you've accomplished. He needed the reassurance of God. Needed the reassurance in his life. Put yourself in Elijah's shoes for just a moment. You just won a tremendous victory there on Mount Carmel. And the next thing you know, you feel like you're all alone. Being chased by the most powerful people in the land. They're out to take your life. You feel like God has showed himself there on Mount Carmel, but then where's he at? Where's he at? You're doing the running. What's God doing? We sometimes feel that way, don't we? Elijah's desires here had all but disappeared. His desire to be a prophet had vanished. His desire to live had vanished. All those things had come about. He was in the midst of a pity party. He was in the midst of feeling so sorry for himself, he didn't even want it to continue. I hope none of you have ever felt that way. But I know at times life beats us around the head and shoulders till we do feel that way. Do we just don't want to go on? Do we just don't want to put one foot in front of the other or take another breath? Lord, wouldn't it be better you just come and get me? Wouldn't it be better you just take me on? Wouldn't it be easier on both of us? And that's kind of the mindset we develop at times, isn't it? That's where Elijah was. And that's what he was thinking in his life. His desire for life had completely left him. And in this moment, Elijah didn't need the power and the strength that was bestowed or portrayed out at the mouth of that cave. You know, a lot of times when we're looking for God, we're looking for those things. You know, the Bible tells us that he came in a mighty wind, and the wind just blowed all kinds of stuff around out there. Sometimes we're looking for that in our lives when we're seeking God. And then next there was an earthquake, and the earthquake come and it shook the rocks and shook the mountain and all that. And sometimes we're looking for that in our lives. And God can move in all these ways. We can see those things happen. But sometimes we don't need those waves in our life. You know, if he'd have come in the wind, or if he'd have come in the earthquake, or if he'd have come in the fire, in that moment it might have overpowered Elijah. Elijah might have went on into his shell and continued to tremble and think, just how weak am I? Because these are the things that I look for, and yet look at how they've scared me in my life. It wasn't what he needed. And therefore, God didn't appear in those things. He didn't appear in the wind or the fire or the earthquake, because I think he knew that wasn't what Elijah needed. I think he knew what Elijah needed at that moment was a still small voice. And he came in that manner. He came in the manner that most suited Elijah's need and most soothed Elijah's heart at that moment in time. Just exactly what he needed. And as he done this, it revealed his nature. It revealed the nature of God here. You know, we know that God can come in all these things. He could have shook Elijah out of that cave with the earthquake. He could have bounced him right out on the middle of the pad there in front of the cave's mouth and began to say, Elijah, I want you to get up. I want you to do something. He could have railed down on him. But that probably wouldn't have helped, would it? You know, I've noticed a lot of times when somebody sets their mind to not do something and you tell them they're going to do something, guess what happens? They dig in just a little deeper, don't they? So it doesn't do any good. God knew that. He knew that wasn't what Elijah needed. He knew that he could show his power in full force. He knew that he could control nature at its very being, and yet he knew that none of those things was what Elijah needed at that moment. He knew Elijah needed that still small voice in his life. You see, when God showed up on Mount Carmel, He showed up in a mighty way, didn't He? When the fire came down, it licked up the sacrifice and everything there. There was no doubt that He was God. It don't just happen automatically that those things come about in our lives. Elijah had experienced the power of God, the same power that he was seeing out there at the mouth of that cave. He'd experienced those things, and yet he was in the valley. He was in the depression part. He wasn't on that mountaintop anymore. And it wasn't those things that got him pumped up and waving his fist in the air saying, "That is my God," right there. It wasn't those things that he needed at that moment in time. It was that pat on the back and saying, "Okay, Elijah, I understand. We just need a little encouragement here. Get in there and get it. I know you can do it. I know you can do it." That's what God was doing for him here. While He's judge and all-powerful and He can do what He wants, He deals with you and me very rarely with fire. And I'm thankful for that. Very rarely does He come at us in that manner. Very rarely does He do those things to us in our lives. If He did, we'd all be scared to death most of the time, wouldn't we? Because of what God can do. But this doesn't mean that God doesn't bring judgment. He does. But that's not His first response. His first response is not judgment. I'm thankful that God's a lot calmer when He deals with us than we are when we deal with each other. If He wasn't, then He'd bring the fire first, wouldn't He? How often do we have to deal with someone and that's the first thing we want to do is bring the fire? We'll give them a piece of our mind. We'll show them who's up and who's down. We'll do something. That's our first mindset. But that's not God's, and I'm thankful for that. That's not His first response. He's a lot calmer than we are. And as He came to Elijah here, He revealed His tender nature to him. He revealed that nurturing side. He revealed that side of Himself that we can each experience, that we can have in our lives. Now, we have to remember at this point in time, Elijah's life was broken. Elijah was broken. He was finished. He was done. He was in shambles. And God had to pick up the pieces and put them back together and say, "Okay, Elijah, you're ready. Go on. You're ready. Go on." I guess the closest thing I can think of is when a child begins to walk. They first start walking and then they'll start to run. And as they take off running, they'll splatter out, belly flop in the front yard. And all the world has come to an end. They are crying and screaming and hollering and all those different things going on. And Mama or Grandma walks out there and picks them up and dusts off her little knees and kisses them on the cheek and says, "Hey, it's all right. Go run and have fun." And the next thing you know, what are they doing? They're out there running and having fun again. Got them arms stowed up in the air having a big time. It's the same way it was with Elijah here in God. God picked him up and dusted him off and gave him a little kiss on the cheek and said, "It's okay, Elijah. You're ready to go now. You're ready to go." And that's the same thing He does with us. The same thing He does is He comes to us and ministers to us when we're in that broken place. God met His brokenness with tenderness, which is what He does for us when we find ourselves in that broken place. We can have these times, or we can see these times as they come about, and they're calm and they're a reassuring sense of God's presence that we can have on a day-to-day basis. We can enjoy these things. There'll be moments in our life when we sense God at a greater time than others. Sometimes we may see God in that fire, or in the wind, or in the earthquake. But more than likely, when we come in contact with God, it's going to be because of that still small voice. You see, this is a place that God speaks from. He appeared here to Elijah in this gentle whisper. Same way He speaks to us. With His caring, His loving, His compassion fully exposed for Elijah to see. The same as He is for us. When I was living in a life of sin, God very well could have come to me in the fire and brimstone. And I believe that maybe He did a little bit in some of these things. You know, some of what led me, or I guess part of what led me to come to know the Lord, was the circumstance that had been in my life, where my brother had been killed in a car wreck. I guess maybe I could see some of that wind and earthquake and fire through those things. It shook me. But then when I needed God, He came to me in that still small voice, with that compassion, that caring love. He could have said, "You're low down and rotten," and He'd have been right. But He didn't. He said, "I love you, and I care about you, and I want you to come home." That's what He told me. And He did. He did love me. He did care about me. I know that because I've experienced that for several years in my life. The last 30, probably, close to 25 anyway. I've experienced that love and care, that compassion that only God can give. But the thing is, we have to listen, don't we? Elijah, as he stood in that cave and he saw the wind go by, he didn't hear God. When he saw the earthquake, he didn't hear God. When he saw the fire on the mountain there, he didn't hear God. And these are some ways that God had come out and showed Himself to the Israelites, showed Himself to Moses, His servant, there on this mount that He's on. So we know that God could be in some of those things, but He wasn't in those for Elijah here. And then He come with that still small voice. And Elijah wrapped his mantle around his face and he walked out the mouth of the cave. He was listening. He was listening. You know, if there's one thing that's required for God to show up and speak to us in this manner, that you must be listening. And you must make room for His presence in your life. You got to tune your ears in to Him. We have to be listening. If you'll notice, Elijah didn't see Him. He wrapped his mantle around his face. He didn't see God. He was listening for God. One of the reasons he wrapped that mantle around his face is because the Bible tells us that anybody that sees God is going to die, right? So he knew those things. And he wasn't taking a chance there. He wrapped that around his eyes, wrapped that around his face, and he come out to listen to what God had to say. He had made room for the presence of God, and he had tuned his ears to His voice. He was ready to listen to Him. You know, God asked him there in verse 14, He said, "Why are you here?" And He told him. He said, "Lord, I've been zealous. I've been doing the things that You wanted me to do. I've been striving to get Your name among Your people again. I've been striving to get Israel to turn themselves to You. I've been doing everything that I can do. And look at where I found myself. They want me dead. I'm the only one left. I'm in a terrible shape." He used "I" too much there, didn't he? Look at what I've done. Look at what I've tried to accomplish. Look at where I'm at. He got himself in the wrong place. What did God say? Verse 15, it says, "And the Lord said unto him, Go, return on thy way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when thou comest, anoint Hazael to be king over Syria." He gave him a task. He said, "Elijah, you're all right. You're all right. You're not the only one left. You're not going to be destroyed the way you think, I've got plans left for you. Go do this for me. You know, when we begin to listen, we hear what God's plans are for us. But the thing is, we have to listen, don't we? You see, that first still small voice that we need to hear is, come to me. That's the one that I heard. Come to me. Elijah went out to meet him, didn't he? He had to come to God. We have to come to God first and give our lives and our hearts to Him. And then once we do that, we have to listen for that still small voice. So are you listening for that today? Are you listening for that voice? And if you're listening, are you responding? We're sitting there in that cave all by yourself feeling sorry. We have to respond once we hear it. If you would, stand with me this morning.
Page 591. Have thine own way, Lord. Have thine own way.
Are we listening to Him this morning and allowing Him to have His way in our life? Giving everything to Him? That's His desire for us. He has a plan and a purpose greater than we can ever know. But yet, we have to be willing to listen. Have to be willing to step out of the gate and allow ourselves to do what it is that He desires. Are we there today? Are we listening to Him? I certainly hope so. And I'm thankful that God still calls. Has anybody got testimony or anything this morning you want to say?
Yeah, I'm glad the Lord's always where we need Him to be. He's always at the same spot when we're wherever we're at. We're the one moving, not Him. I'm just thankful for that.
He knows where we're at and knows where to find us. I'm thankful for that too. Amen. Anyone else? Tonight is friends and family. We'll meet over in the fellowship hall and have a time of fellowship tonight. I think we're probably going to have pizza is what I understand tonight. So bring something to go along with pizza, dessert or whatever, and we'll have us a good time of fun and fellowship together. This coming week, we've got one anniversary. Jerry and Susie's anniversary is on Tuesday. We'd like to wish them a happy anniversary. And then to back up a week, last Wednesday was Alan's birthday, so we'll let Janet take Alan something sweet. Is there any here that we might have missed? Birthday or anniversary or anything like that?